Geometries of hunger. We had chosen the cabin for its isolation. Nestled in the folds of an ancient forest, it was a squat wooden structure with weathered shingles and a stone chimney that hadn't smoked in decades. Maps marked the surrounding land as dense woodland with no maintained trails for miles. Perfect, we told ourselves, for a week away from the city and its noise. The first night passed uneventfully. The fire crackled, wind whispered through pines, and the smell of wet needles hung in the air. We unpacked our supplies: canned beans, dried fruit, nuts, a small bag of jerky, and organized them on the counter, careful but casual. Morning came with sunlight pale and diffused, dust motes floating lazily in the shafts piercing the cabin windows. I opened the cupboard to get breakfast, and my stomach stuttered. The food wasn't where we had left it. Not just moved, arranged. Cans and packets formed a near-perfect circle on the counter, concentric and precise. Each item angled with mathematical care, the spacing exact down to centimeters. "Okay," I said, voice low. "That's odd." Lena, checking the stove, froze. "Did one of you do this as a joke?" "No," said Mark. "We were all asleep. And look at it. It's too perfect. Someone measured this." We stared, uneasy. The wind had stilled outside, the forest silent as if holding its breath. Birds weren't singing. A crow cawed once, then nothing. The day passed with a growing tension. Each of us moved carefully, listening to the cabin, the trees, the faint rustle of branches. By nightfall, the shapes had changed. Triangles, spirals, grids. Every morning after that, the food was transformed again, as if the cabin had a resident artist whose medium was our provisions. We talked about it in strained voices, trying to rationalize. "Maybe it's someone watching us," Lena suggested, glancing toward the darkened woods. "A prankster, a local." "Too precise," Mark countered. "Look at the last arrangement. There's symmetry, spacing, angles. This isn't human at this scale. Not someone just sneaking in." I wanted to believe him, but part of me hungered for an explanation. I began noting the shapes in a notebook, sketching them in graphite and ink, trying to find a pattern, a message. Circles gave way to nested polygons. Triangles overlapped. Spirals twisted into interlocking grids. Then the food began moving while we were awake. I saw it first. A can slid across the counter, rotating slightly as it traveled, joining a spiral forming from yesterday's spiral. I froze. The movement was deliberate, careful, as if aware of my gaze. Lena screamed when a bundle of jerky levitated from the shelf, dropping precisely onto the apex of a triangle forming on the table. Mark grabbed a chair, shaking it as though to prove there was someone there, but the cabin was empty. The forest outside had changed. Footprints appeared in the mud beyond the porch. Long, narrow, oddly jointed, far too large for any deer or bear. Branches bent at unnatural angles, casting crooked shadows through the windows. The silence was no longer passive. It was deliberate, heavy, almost tactile. Arguments flared. "It's a warning," Lena said. "They're telling us to leave." "No," Mark said, his voice shaking. "It's studying us. Every morning, watching how we sleep, how we eat, how we move. The shapes, they know us." I remained silent, haunted. Each morning, the arrangements grew more personal. One day, my half-empty coffee cup was included, aligned with the cans in a perfect radial pattern. Another, Lena's knife rested at the exact center of a triangular configuration. I noticed too late that Mark's notebook had been opened and a line of text, my sketches from yesterday, was perfectly incorporated into the grid of food items. The cabin itself felt like it was breathing. Floors shifted slightly underfoot. The ceiling sagged in impossible angles, and shadows bent at the edges of my vision. We were aware of being watched at every moment. Not from outside, but from every surface, every corner. One night, I woke to the faintest scraping sound against the counter. My flashlight revealed a sight that made my blood freeze. Beans rolling into place, packets nudging themselves upright. The spiral on the table had doubled in complexity while we slept. It now contained something unmistakable, letters spelled in tiny seeds. My name, Lena's, Mark's. We fled the cabin at dawn, packs half-packed, leaving behind food and notes. Outside, the forest seemed calm again. But when we looked back, we realized the cabin door was ajar, despite having been locked. The trail leading to the woods was no longer muddy. It was patterned. Footprints and markings repeated in regular intervals, like geometric grids laid into the soil. We drove without speaking, the car silent except for the engine. But at night, when I closed my eyes, I could see the arrangements forming in my mind. Circles spiraling into triangles, grids locking together, forming words I didn't write. Weeks later, I returned in secret. The cabin was empty, overgrown with moss, the windows dark. But on the counter, cans and packets had been stacked. Perfect. The spiral, the triangles, the grid, all of them still intact. And at the center, written in a row of tiny seeds, was a message I could not read aloud. It knew my name, and it was waiting. The upstream current. The campsite was perfect in daylight. Nestled in a high mountain basin, the small clearing was cradled by thick firs, their trunks rising like columns from the mossy earth. A narrow stream traced the edge of our tent site, water sparkling in midday sun, riffling over rocks and pebbles with a cheerful, gurgling clarity. Birds called from the canopy, insects droned in lazy circles, and the wind stirred the scent of pine and damp earth. We had joked that the stream was a postcard come to life. Even Tom, usually cynical, admitted it had a kind of magic. At first, nothing seemed wrong. We fished lightly, drank the cold water, and rinsed our hands in the playful current. The forest was alive, but comforting. It began the first night. I woke to the sound of water, high-pitched and insistent, like glass scraping over stone. Moonlight sifted through the branches and struck the stream. My stomach dropped. The current. It was moving the wrong way. I froze, blinking. Pebbles rolled upstream. Small leaves danced backward across the surface. The ripples recoiled against their usual patterns. My heart hammered. I woke Tom and Lila, shaking them awake. "Look," I whispered, pointing. "The water. It's moving the other way." Lila rubbed her eyes. "Maybe it's just the moonlight? Some reflection?" Tom scoffed. "It's moving upstream. That's not a reflection." We watched in tense silence. The river flowed steadily backward, cold mist curling over it like smoke. The sound was sharper, almost desperate. Fish skimmed along the surface, struggling unnaturally, then vanished into shadowy pools, leaving small spirals in their wake. No frogs croaked, no insects hummed near the banks. The forest itself seemed to lean in, listening. By the next day, we tried to rationalize. Perhaps the river ran backward after snowmelt shifted the slope temporarily? Perhaps a hidden spring caused eddies that fooled our perception? During daylight, the stream returned to its ordinary, cheerful course, babbling downstream as if nothing had happened. But night came again, and the current reversed. This time it reacted to us. I noticed first. My boot, left near the bank, tugged backward, drawn with subtle insistence. A floating twig altered its path abruptly as I reached for it. The water twisted around our presence, forming whirlpools just beyond reach. Lila shrieked when a small cooler, abandoned at the shore, drifted upstream and nudged her foot. We need to leave," she said, voice trembling. Tom was silent, eyes fixed on the surface. The stream moved with intelligence. Rocks shifted with almost imperceptible precision. The water was no longer water, it was a body, fluid but sentient. The forest had grown silent. No owls called, no night animals stirred. Trees leaned subtly toward the stream, as if straining to see its surface. Mist thickened. The moonlight fractured, casting narrow beams that caught suspended droplets floating against the current. Shapes appeared beneath the surface. Dark, sinuous forms that shimmered just beyond recognition. I touched the water carefully. The current recoiled, not violently, but with purpose, like a cord pulling taut. Another rock drifted to meet my hand, circling as if testing me. We stepped back. Night after night, the pattern repeated. The stream flowed backward, then returned to normal in daylight. Each night, it became more assertive, more responsive. Leaves spun in intricate arcs. Sticks aligned themselves into strange formations along the bank. When Tom stepped closer, the water surged gently, guiding him toward a bend where foam twisted into spirals that were almost symbols. Lila refused to approach, her whispered prayers growing louder each night. I began to notice subtle signs in the surrounding forest. Small animals avoided the stream entirely. Fawns leapt across the banks without touching the water. Branches bent in unnatural angles, leaning as though straining toward the opposite bank. Silence deepened, so profound it pressed against our ears. One evening, emboldened or foolish, we attempted to wade across. The water flowed backward around our legs, tugging, circling, almost laughing. My boots slipped on stones that seemed to rise to meet me. The current carried sticks and small stones upstream toward a point I could not see. Shadows beneath the water swirled, forming shapes that hinted at depth, intent, intelligence. Tom's flashlight caught something moving beneath the surface. Long, black forms, curved and flexible, sliding in synchrony. I tried to look closer, and the water recoiled, forming a sudden vortex. The mist boiled at the surface, carrying a scent like wet stone and something older, metallic. I realized then, the stream was not simply reversed. It was aware of us, measuring us, testing our reactions, learning how we moved, what we feared. It was a mirror but not a reflection, an entity in its own right. On the seventh night, the water reached for us. I had placed a small stick across the bank. It was drawn from my fingers and pulled upstream, past the bend, past the shadows, as though the stream wanted to see how far it could extend its reach. Lila cried out when a small lantern floated toward the center, tilting, light flickering, casting long, trembling reflections across the forest floor. I understood the truth too late. The stream was not a river. It was a boundary, a mouth, and it was patient, watching, waiting. I tried to step backward. The water shifted with us, surging toward my boots, curling around the ankles, tugging insistently. I fell to my knees. The moonlight revealed shapes in the mist, forms that hinted at spines, curves, and mouths beneath the dark surface. The current lifted small rocks, tossing them upstream like toys, testing strength and reaction. Tom screamed, slipping into the shallows. Lila grabbed him, but the water tugged at his arm. Something beneath the surface stirred in reply, large, impossible, and deliberate. The mist thickened, cold against my skin, smelling of iron and decay. I scrambled to the bank, dragging them with me. Behind us, the stream calmed, flowing normally again as if nothing had happened. The forest exhaled. Silence returned, heavier than before, filled with the unspoken promise that the water would wait. Patient, eternal. We left at first light, abandoning the campsite and the high mountain basin. Down the trail, I dared not look back. But at night, in dreams, I hear it. The faint gurgle of water flowing upstream, the cold tug against my feet, shapes swimming beneath a dark surface, waiting for the next moment I step too close. The stream is not just a stream. It is a mouth, a lure, a boundary that opens only for those foolish enough to come near. And I know, even now, it remembers us, and it will wait.